I'm skeptical why you actually don't believe in a God.
Skeptical?
Yes, I don't see how you can actually not believe in a God. I don't understand that position.
So you think we're lying if we say we don't believe in a God?
I don't think you're lying. I just don't. I'm wondering how you arrived at that position.
Not being convinced of the existence of a deity.
Basically, yeah.
At this current point in time. That's kind of the long and short of it.
Okay, so you guys mentioned that you don't really believe. I'm going to be careful how I say this in sort of some kind of purpose, or that so things don't really, there's no such thing as meaning, and I don't really understand how one could arrive at that conclusion.
I feel like, okay, so I remember this conversation last week, and I remember you would say things like, atheists don't believe in meaning, and I would say, that's not what I said.
Yeah, and I
feel like you're astounded at a position that I don't actually have. Although, yeah.
What it was, Richard Dawkins says something like, don't ask why questions, is you're actually asking a how.
Well, I cannot see Richard Dawkins saying that.
He's definitely said that. But okay. Another point of mine.
I mean, I've read a lot of Dawkins, and that sounds at odds with the kind of things that I have heard him say. And maybe he said that in a specific narrow context. But I mean, sure.
So my next point is, I don't understand why science actually people use science to prove God, or say that science is one day going to prove God, or science disproves God. I find that completely. I think that actually science is just one tool of. It's a tool to explain how things work, but I don't think it has any relation to religion at all.
Well, I agree with that.
Yeah. So.
But I don't think that says much for religion, because I think that when something is scientifically investigated, it's done with the purpose of, you don't know whether something's true or not, so you're going to find a way to settle the question. And I think you're right that religion has nothing to do with science, but only in the sense that religion sets itself up to where it can't be investigated or analyzed or demonstrated to be true or false. And my conclusion from that is it's not useful and probably not true. It's just me.
I'm not going to go into the whole debate of how can you be certain that what you know is what you know and whatever. But I'm going to say that...
Feel free if you want.
What are the chances that you know science, religion, or Christianity is false or is not relevant?
Christianity is a pretty broad topic. You want to give me something specific and we can talk about whether it's true or false?
So I'm just trying to get to like how you arrived at being an atheist, because if you seem to not be convinced by the 2,000 years or over 1,000 pages of text of things that were written that happened, from a very long time.
There's a lot of text in the world that was written a long time ago that I don't believe, and I'd be willing to bet that there's a lot of text you don't believe either. So
let's talk about the young Earth, right?
What?
So you don't believe that the Earth was made in 7 days?
Definitely not.
Okay, but I mean, from a scientific point of view, I can completely understand your position. However, I'm skeptical how science actually can demonstrate that is the case.
Should we go into the evidence for an old Earth, or is this getting off topic?
I mean, let's go into the whole young Earth thing.
Well, I mean, see, you have this very particular belief which you know is completely at odds with science, and I'm just wondering if you have ever picked up a book that was written from the point of view of talking about the age of the Earth or the age of the universe, as opposed to just reading arguments against it. Because I've read the Bible, and I've read a number of books by professional apologists, so I'm curious if you have picked up any books that try to explain science to a layperson. Because, to be frank, the rest of this show is not going to be enough for me to go over everything, although I can give you a quick overview if you want.
Sure.
You do want?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, my question is, I'm just trying to get to the whole reason of how you arrived at being an atheist, and obviously my position is that I mean the young Earth story. Okay, it's 7 days. Yeah, it doesn't seem like that could, Big Bang Theory says it was over a number of billions of years it happened.
Yeah, but if you're just asking how I arrived at the conclusion of atheism, that has almost nothing to do with how old I think the Earth is. I mean, that is an interesting background fact, but it's not what led me to atheism.
So I've looked into the actual facts for the young Earth argument.
Yeah.
And
by actual facts, I'm going to assume you mean professional Christian arguments.
I've looked into the science of how actually carbon...
By whom?
Sorry.
What sources did you learn that from?
I read on Wikipedia on how actually radiocarbon dating works.
Okay,
itself.
Well, I guess that's a start.
And I mean, in order to the actual dating process, it uses the fact that there's radiocarbon decay and so forth, so on, that every so many years,
right. Roughly right, with the recognition that there is a certain distance limit beyond which specific kinds of radiocarbon dating aren't useful, which is why the age of the Earth isn't determined through radiocarbon dating. It's just the age of specific things that are dug up.
Right. Well, I mean, that's how specifically they date things, and that's
how they date specific certain kinds of things.
Yes. So based on that data alone, it's not sufficient for me to believe that the Earth was not made in 7 days.
Do you know how the age of the universe was calculated? Because it sure wasn't through radiocarbon dating.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. I'm talking about the fact that something is 7 billion years old or something like that. There's no actual physical proof or evidence to suggest that. It's just based on mathematical calculations, which I'm not trying to dismiss.
Right.
But, how can... I mean, I'm not talking about the Big Bang either. I'm just talking about, when they date, the fact even evolution, the fact that they say that how they date fossils and stuff like that. For me, I'm not convinced by the science. Actually, I've looked into the science and I've read about the Cambrian explosion, whatever. I've read all about that. On Wikipedia. I've read the topics
and what led you to the conclusion that it was like 6,000 to 10,000 years old, or whatever you believe?
Well, it's just a lack of evidence.
No. I mean, what led you to? How old do you think the Earth is?
Well, I go by the Bible narrative.
Okay, why?
Because it, for me, makes sense.
Pardon me for saying so, but it feels like your standards are a little lower when it comes to the Bible than to trying to understand the science. Because if I had just answered your question about how did you decide that the Earth was billions of years old by saying, well, it just feels right to me, I think you would jump all over me for that,
I was
right?
going to make that point, because my source of belief doesn't, or my standpoint doesn't come from purely a scientific base. It comes from just a common sense point, because...
Common sense? Okay.
Oh, dear.
So let me explain my position, because the Bible, for me, explains the the existence or the point. It explains life in the best possible way. Science doesn't provide that. It's
The best possible way.
So I explain. So let me explain why I think that. So there was one thing. Going into the Bible, it explains that there was a tree of good and evil, or good and bad, whatever. Tree of knowledge. That's what they call it.
And then there was a talking snake.
Right,
serpent.
And that's total common sense that everybody has no problem with.
So my point is that, yes, this tree of knowledge, so we didn't know anything about knowledge, and then we gained from the tree, and then we became aware, which means we have knowledge. We gained the ability to have knowledge, right?
And that was a bad thing, I think.
It was a bad thing, because now, this is precisely my point. Knowing too much can lead to meaningless.
Okay.
Because knowledge is infinite, so you can never know everything. So it's like you might find out something about the beginnings of the earth.
So why were you researching at all? Then, if that's the case,
it's an infinite regression of knowledge. So there's always meta knowledge over meta knowledge, and it never stops. So it becomes meaningless. So for me, knowledge is meaningless, and science is meaningless.
So
science is a subject.
For me. You're saying a couple of things which don't seem to hang together. One of which is that you've done extensive research into the scientific background of things like radiocarbon dating, but at the same time, you're saying that knowledge is meaningless and that your preferred position for safety is one of carefully curated ignorance. I mean, am I being unfair when I say that?
Carefully, I'm not sure exactly how you.
I mean, you're saying that it's not good to know too much, but you're also saying that you thoroughly understand this science and reject it due to what you are referring to as common sense. But you also accept the talking snake.
I don't need to thoroughly dismiss science or thoroughly to understand something in order to dismiss it. Okay. I understand enough to dismiss it.
Okay. Do you think you understand enough?
A talking snake, well, yeah, why not? It's God.
Like I said, your standards for that seem a little bit lower.
But, I mean, if you told me 2,000 years ago that this Big Bang happened, and I would also probably laugh at you and think, well, you're ignorant. And because,
and I would just say, why not?
Sure.
It's the most convincing thing in the world.
Good for you.
So there you go then. So at least you both understand that, things
No.
change.
No. I don't know.
What don't you understand?
No.
What's there not to understand? Sorry. Missing the point.
It's interesting, like your standards of evidence, like going back to the talking serpent, and that you accept that because, well, why not? It's God, and that's a very interesting way of coming to grips with knowledge. By the same token, you said knowledge was meaningless, and that so getting too much of it just leads to an infinite regress, and so it's meaningless. But you obtained enough knowledge of the science to be unconvinced of that science and kind of retreat back to the book that you. It's a very interesting thought process of arriving.
Very selective thinking.
You should explore that thought process because you will arrive at some interesting conclusions.
What? Can you say that last bit again? I didn't catch.
I'm proposing this thought process because it will actually ensure that you arrive at some very interesting conclusions.
Well, interesting conclusions and correct conclusions are not necessarily the same thing.
Sure.
And I'm just, I'm just wondering, in your mind, is the state of knowing or understanding something entirely dependent on the things that you just arbitrarily choose to believe, or is there, or do you care about figuring out the distinction between made-up stuff and true factual stuff?
And do you use this method in other things in your life as well to judge what's true or not?
Mm-hmm. If you met a guy who was, let's say, a Buddhist monk or a Mormon, let's say, who made these specific claims that Joseph Smith found some golden tablets and they were from ancient Jews who traveled to America, you don't believe that, right?
Well, no, because that wasn't written for. That doesn't have a substantial history. So the Bible has
So what?
years of writing.
But there are other things that have substantial histories that you also don't believe, right?
Like what?
Zeus or Odin.
Well,
like those have substantial histories, right? Chinese ancestral worship.
How long were those written?
Dragons in Chinese. A lot of them are older than the Bible, seriously.
Right, well, that talks about one specific thing.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out your standard of how you decide what to believe or not believe, because it seems like you've just latched onto a particular source and said this is right, but don't have a reason for choosing that one over Chinese mythology.
I mean, I'm really confused by the word standard. I mean,
well,
why is there a definition of
obviously.
What I believe? I mean, not everyone has the same perspective in life.
Right.
Of course.
I think that's where it comes down to perspective on how you view the world, and
right,
how you
but
view the evidence that you see. Because I mean, a scientific fact can be, there can be a scientific finding, but how you perceive that finding is actually it's determined by the person.
Okay, but it sounds like
even if I perceive that my bank account has $1 million, that won't change the reality that is not what is currently in there.
Well, you're in luck, Phil, because when I wave my hands like this, you will have $1 million in your bank account, and so you can just believe me.
We can do some scientific
testing. Is that
science isn't reliable, so even if you look at your bank account on the website and it says you only have $17, I'm telling you have $1 million, and my common sense tells me that it's true.
Got it.
Right, the next point will explain this. How you view the £1 million in your bank account is what I'm trying to get at. Not the fact that you will have £1 million in your bank account, but how do you view that £1 million, and how you view that £1 million determines what you'll probably do with it. So I'm not talking about the fact. The fact is the knowledge, but the decision it comes from perspective. What do I do with this fact? And that's where perspective comes into it.
But shouldn't you establish the fact first?
That's regardless of the point. The fact that it's
well, I mean, I kind of think that is the point.
No, my point is, how do you view the fact? How do you view?
You make sure that it's
I don't know what your question is.
I don't know.
Okay, so perspective is about view. It's about having a specific understanding of something, of a fact, of reality, whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
So that's my point. Is that yes, there is knowledge. Yes, there are facts. But how do you perceive those facts? That's what I'm trying to get at. And that's how you arrive at your different world.
Okay,
so being an atheist or a Christian.
So, can you make yourself believe right now that I just put $1 million in Phil's bank account by waving your hand?
Well, that doesn't matter.
What do you mean it doesn't matter? I think that's the whole thing we're talking about.
Regardless of whether there is a bank account or not, or there's £1 million in or not, whether I believe. Okay, I see your point now. Well, look at it more as a puzzle. You have to put the pieces of the puzzle together, but in order to do that, you have to look at it from a specific perspective in order to understand what you're looking at. And once you do that, then you arrive at different conclusions. That's how everyone arrives at different conclusions.
Could I take this puzzle and just, I don't know, grind it up into a pulp and shove them into, between the tiles in my bathroom and say, hey, I've solved the puzzle and it's a unicorn?
Right. This goes into kind of information theory, like there's...
Well, but I mean, would you agree that I've solved the puzzle and seen the thing that the puzzle was, or would you think, wait a minute, that doesn't seem to be the way that the puzzle works?
Right. Well, and that's precisely my point. It's about perspective. How do you?
You didn't answer the question. You just said it's precisely my point, but you didn't answer the question.
What was the question? Sorry.
Do you think that's like, Do you think that's a reasonable way of approaching a jigsaw puzzle, or do you think that somebody who does that should probably pick up a different hobby?
I missed the point, sorry.
Yes.
My point is, if you understand information theory...
I'm aware of information theory.
There's noise.
Uh-huh.
And then there's the opposite of noise, which is meaning or whatever. So what I'm trying to say is that we need to find the meaning in the noise and the random the noise.
So what's your strategy for determining true from false things? Or would you say that that's not even a meaningful distinction, that it's whatever your perspective is right for you?
No, I think perspective is how you approach finding meaning in.
So if I say I don't think there's a God, would you just accept that I'm right from my perspective, or is there more to it?
There's definitely more to it, because that's one way of looking at it, but there's another way of looking at it.
So I'm granting there's another way of looking at it, but you're trying to tell me that everything is about perspective. So you have to agree that from my perspective, there's no God.
I can completely understand your perspective, and I don't understand it. That's why I'm trying to discuss. Because my perspective, I see something completely different.
Okay, and so you're just saying that in these frames, different things are true for different people, and there's no way to resolve or come together on the distinction.
Oh, there definitely is, but
there is. What is it? I wish you'd tell me. Although I'm probably gonna wrap up this call pretty soon.
Oh, do you want to tell you?
What is your strategy for bringing two different perspectives together and resolving which one is true?
Mm-hmm. Looking at your perspective, you're saying that, it's essentially there's no purpose, and that is for me the big question mark. And I think also that your basis is on knowledge, and knowledge is infinite, and that's not sufficient.
Knowledge is not infinite. That doesn't make any sense.
You don't even understand the premise of my arguments. So.
Okay, well, I'm sorry. Maybe try again next week and communicate it a little better. I'm going to put you back on hold, and one of the call screeners will pick you back up, and then we'll let you go. Thanks for calling again.
Thanks. Cheers, bye.
All right.